You've seen the images. Millions of migrants, many being unaccompanied children, streaming across the United States southern border. Desperate families blend with criminals, having paid gangs and cartels for their transit. Through this criminal exploitation of innocence and the very policies of the U.S. immigration system, children remain the most vulnerable. America's Future now brings you stories from the front line, not bureaucrats, but everyday citizens and public servants demanding answers for all Americans, whose billions of taxpayer dollars have been spent on a broken system. Reunited for the first time, these 4 brave whistleblowers, 2 current federal employees and 2 from private government contractors, share stories of what they witnessed working around the Pomona Fairgrounds Migrant Intake Facility in 2021. The Southern California facility processed nearly 9,000 unaccompanied children over its 8-month operation.
I'm Tara Rodas, here in Washington, D.C. Behind me is the spirit of justice, with a child by her side. I've been a federal employee for more than 20 years. I was deployed to the Pomona Fairplex in 2021, and I started off as a youth care worker, later promoted to the deputy of the federal case management team. Justice is vital to all Americans, especially to our children, who must be protected and defended from evil. That's why I'm proud as an HHS whistleblower to be joined today by brave public servants and insiders who are going to be coming forward for the first time to tell their full stories. Together, we will expose how the U.S. government put children into the hands of unvetted sponsors. Some are criminals and traffickers and members of transnational criminal organizations who sex traffic and labor traffic the children.
And a lot of these kids were lost as to where is it they were heading to.
So Carlos, based on the email that you just shared with us, it's clear that the government knew that children were not going to the correct people.
Correct. My name's Carlos Arellano. I was an unaccompanied minor migrant escort across the United States. My job was to move children from point A to point B, and we used to move kids in the thousands per week.
MVM Inc., a private security contractor, was awarded a multi-million-dollar contract by the Department of Homeland Security in 2020, amounting to nearly $700 million.
And you keep telling them, and you keep telling them, and nothing is being done. It weighs very heavy, Yes. Very heavy. My name is Mayra Moreno. I worked at the Pomona Fairgrounds for 6 months. I began working there as a case manager, then became a case manager lead with backgrounds and fingerprints.
Maxim Healthcare Services was contracted to manage the operations at the Pomona, California Immigration Intake Facility in April 2021 by Cherokee Federal. Cherokee Federal was awarded a nearly $900 million contract for these services.
We cannot continue to fund a program that has failed over and over again, year after year. How many times does this have to go before Congress? How many times does the Inspector General have to do a report? My name is Deborah White. I'm a federal employee for over 10 years. I was selected for a detail to the HHS Pomona Fairplex to assist with the undocumented children. I was selected because of my project management and contracting skills. I'm also a native Spanish speaker.
We must ask ourselves, where did these children go? All right, so let's talk about what was our first day like.
When I was in orientation, it was a joke. I went with another case manager that was also starting that day with me. And when we go in there, it was just chaotic. Everybody was doing different things, getting pulled from different directions. There was no organization. And so I was like, what am I doing? How am I going to help? There was no proper training. So it was just very chaotic. My first day, my first experience there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Tara, you're familiar with my first day because we've been together since the beginning. You know, we took a photo arriving in California. We were very hopeful, very excited to come and, you know, do good work. You know, we thought, hey, regardless of where you lie on the political spectrum, it doesn't matter. You know, we are here to help children, however you feel about the situation. There was no structure, no organization, which was very surprising to me because HHS has been doing this for a very long time. And I would think that they had already standard operating procedures to ensure, you know, a smooth process, you know, but it was not that way. It was absolutely chaotic, and there was just a lot of finger pointing. The government blamed the contractor blamed the government for lack of guidance.
Yeah, so in 2021 is when you guys were all on Pomona, right?
Yeah.
So my first day dealing with Pomona is I showed up to California. You meet all these people you had never seen before, and everybody's talking. Everybody's like, how long have you been here? How long have you been flying around with kids? How is it? What's your experience? And then you start talking, and you find out that a lot of people sitting next to you that are now in charge of kids were working in fast food, we're working in retail. So many areas that you're like, how are you ending up with children? Right. They would tell you, I got hired yesterday. I got hired 2 days ago. I got hired last night, and they told me, be ready this morning to fly out and head out to California. And you would tell yourself, I went through FBI fingerprints. I went through so many background checks that took months. And it's like, how are you letting people who don't know what they're doing, 1, 2, their backgrounds are not in yet, and they're about to have access to a child within 2 hours.
And they were always trying to come up with new, crazy ideas of how to get something done. One of the more nefarious things I remember, maybe you'll remember this too, is when they were trying to vaccinate the children.
Yes.
And the children did not want to be vaccinated. And they implemented Operation Deep Freeze so that they could give a popsicle to a child to get their vaccination.
Oh, wow.
So,
yes, I do remember they were talking about that in the command center one morning about the success of it, because you have a child who's, you know, hungry, thirsty, whatever it is, you know, after a long journey, and the first thing that they do when they, you know, come off that bus is go to that medical tent where basically they're trying to coerce the kid to get a COVID vaccination, and if they don't want to, like, they'll offer them a popsicle. Again, hungry, thirsty child, offer them a popsicle to get a shot. Yeah.
Before you guys came in, I remember that one of the directors gathered all of the case managers and told us, come in because this is very important. And they said, please make sure that you're not sharing information because the feds are in the building and they're here to make deportations. So, you know, so in the beginning, we were very like, why are you looking at my paperwork? You know, leave me alone. We were like, why? And then I remember because we were sitting by the American flags. So I used to sit all the way in the back, and then you came in the back. And I was like, why is the Fed behind us? What is going on? You know, and I didn't know what was happening because they had told us, you know, the Feds are here in the building and they're here to deport the children. And so as case managers, you know, we were very passionate. We wanted to reunify the children with their family members. So having you there at first, it was very like nerve-wracking because we really didn't know what was going on, why you guys were there. So they instilled fear on the case management team. So after they said that, they said, that's why it's very important that we work through these cases and we get these kiddos out. We only had, I believe at first it was something between maybe 16 to 18 days. Then that got cut to, I want to say 10 days. And then it was like a week to 8 days, no more than that. And you had to speed the process. You had to get the kids out before the feds would get them deported, especially our 17-year-olds.
Wow, so Cherokee Federal was saying, we need to move the kids faster, move faster, move faster, because of us.
Right.
That is stunning.
Right. And there were instances where case managers that were working in the morning had no idea what was going on with a certain case or cases that were happening at night, why those were being stalled because they were being red flagged. But they would say, here you go, you have an hour to get familiar with the case, and you got to present your case as to why this kid hasn't left the facility. And so a lot of case managers would say, well, it's not my case. Well, now it is. It's assigned to you and you have an hour. You would go in front of Richard and the team. Richard Zapada was the one that was directing that facility there at the Pomona Fairplex. And so you would go in front of him and you can hear the yelling and the screaming, case managers coming out of the other building or across the room crying in tears because they had just been pretty much scolded in front of 50, 100 people.
Wow. Yeah, they would use shame tactics to try to get a case manager to process the child quickly through. And a lot of times, if there was a delay, it was because there was some red flag that came up. There was a reason for the delay, so this is why they were prioritizing speed over safety of the children.
Deborah, I think what you said, speed over safety, is a very critical thing, right?
Yes.
And then you're saying, that's pressure, move the cases, move the cases, move the cases, and we heard that, right? And somehow it was lost that these are children. I mean, these are little lives in our hands. I mean, I remember hearing children screaming for their parents. I've seen kids have panic attacks. We know of a child who had to be put on suicide watch in the psych ward.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
I remember that one because she was one of mine.
Wow.
She was one of my kiddos. But I also remember another one where one of the other case managers came to me and said, hey, this doesn't feel right. This person is impersonating the voice of a lady, and you were there that night. Debbie was there as well. We put the phone on speaker, and I remember, it was noisy, loud, and all of a sudden the whole room went quiet when they heard him speaking. And she red flagged that case, and they said, no, that's the sponsor. That kid is going.
So Tara, I think you'll recall the 911 call that we made when one of the ladies in transportation came to us and said, I have a troubling phone call. I'm on the phone with this gentleman. I'm getting ready to approve, the transport of this child. And he doesn't know the name of the child. So he went through a couple of names and then finally got it right. But it took him a while, so he told her, hold on, let me figure this out, and then finally gave her the correct name. I mean, we had such limited tools. Really what we did was create, a list of questions that would hopefully corroborate the relationship a little more. And that was us doing that on our own. I mean, that wasn't part of protocol, but we wanted to make sure we weren't delivering children to people that didn't know them. Anyhow, she came back over and said, when I called him the second time, there was someone in the background that screamed help, and then he hung up. And so I said at that point, Tara, we need to call 911.
911, what's your emergency?
Eventually, once we talked to law enforcement, they went out there and said that they went to the address. There was nothing there, so they went to the field next door, found a few trailers, maybe an old house, I don't remember exactly, but they found someone and they said that there was multiple people crammed into this space, but no one by the name that was given as the sponsor of this child. So they could not locate the person.
Right.
And I remember the recommendation, of course, was made to deny at this point sending this child to this sponsor. However, we found out later that the child was sent. Got through transportation and was sent. And so I know, Carlos, you know something about transportation. So the child that, was red flagged and got sent anyways, you don't know about those kind of things, do you?
No, never. Never got told any kind of background on the children or anything like that. Look for any red flags. No, nothing. The environment's always so hostile because the word is everybody wants these contracts. Something you say to another NGO contractor, they can report you, and then we'll lose the contract. You guys will get fired. So do not speak to anybody but the kids. Grab your kids, grab your files, get on the bus. Don't ask anything else. And it was very concerning because some of my experiences were the kids would be on the bus with us and they would lean over and say, where are we going? I wasn't told where I was going. And other kids would say, they woke me up at 1 in the morning and told me someone's coming for me in 4 or 5 hours to have my stuff ready. And a lot of these kids were lost as to where is it they were heading to. Sometimes these kids would say, I don't know who it is who I'm going to. I was told it's my aunt, I was told it's my uncle, and that I met them when I was a baby. And then as the flight would continue on, these kids would get even more, do you guys have a number where I can reach out to you guys if something happens? And I would just say no. The end is at the airport at baggage claim, and that's it. Well, there was actual reports within the companies where these kids were calling the government phone that we had and say, hey, I'm being treated bad. Yeah. I'm being forced to work and I'm only 13. Some kids would even go as far as to say I'm being raped. I'm being made sleep with multiple men. I only had access to the government phones where I would show up for a work day, and when I would come back from dropping the kid off, I would have to hand the phone back off to a supervisor or manager, and I wasn't allowed to have access to the phone outside of work.
So Carlos, how was that experience for you when you got the kid and then transported them to their sponsors? How was that like?
Throughout this process, you eventually tell the sponsor, you need to meet me in baggage claim at the airport. And in baggage claim, you need to have the ID you provided to the federal field specialist. The sponsor knows to have the ID. If the sponsor doesn't have the ID, they know you cannot hand the child off. And when they give you the ID, you're supposed to take a picture of the actual physical ID next to the paper copy ID. And a lot of the times, the faces would not match. It would be a total different person.
Wow.
And escorts would still hand the child off, take the pictures, accept the ID.
And so Carlos, are you saying that not you, but people that you work with handed children to complete strangers that were unvetted, didn't match the ID? Did that happen? That actually happened?
Yes, so an email went out.
Yeah, I remember you sharing that with us, yeah.
And in the email, you have ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, tagged in it. You have MBM McAllen office. You have MBM Pecos office. All these offices in Texas attached to the email. And the subject is in-house issues. And the manager details a lot of issues going on. And in about all these issues, in the middle, like a throwaway subject, is TS, which stands for Transportation Specialist, which is an escort, has been taking the liberty of accepting alternate documents without federal field specialist approval. So each office has about 300 to 400 escorts. Some can have 500, some can have 200. And all these escorts are moving kids in the thousands each week.
So thousands of children handed off to the wrong people. And so that might explain why today there's at least 85,000 children missing from this program that would explain why hundreds of children are calling a hotline to say, I'm being abused, neglected, and trafficked?
I don't believe 85,000 is correct. I believe it's a much larger number because in 2021, when the sites like Pomona were open, the picture taking with the government phone was not implemented when it first started. When it first started, we had papers on us, a clipboard with papers, and we were not taking pictures of an actual ID. It was just hold up the paperwork. When the sponsor's in front of you, is just hold up the paperwork and try to see if they match. And there was no cell phone, there was no government phone, there was no way for us to take picture of the IDs that were being given to us.
When we were seeing these IDs, some of these IDs were false, and we can tell. You don't have to be an expert, but you could tell that these IDs were false. I had a guy telling me, what do you mean it's not okay? I just paid $200 for it, you know.
Somebody told you that?
Yes,
Oh
I
my
just
goodness.
paid $200 for the ID. I can't go get another one. And I brought that up to, the upper, management team. And I was told we were not there to investigate the sponsor, that we were there to reunify the child to the sponsor. That was one of the things. And then the other thing that we were told were, well, you're not a professional. How would you know? Mm-hmm. So knowing that you're taking information or documentation that can potentially put this kiddo in harm's way, and you keep telling them and you keep telling them and nothing is being done. I have children. It's frustrating. And so it weighs very heavy,
Yes.
very heavy, that you get to sleep with your child, your children. I'm sorry. You get to sleep with your children. And there's parents and moms that can't because their children are not with them. I'm sorry.
So Carlos, based on the email that you just shared with us and the process that you were doing at the airport, it's clear that the government knew that children were not going to the correct people.
Correct, and it's the team lead, the TL, has the final say so. So I had a couple of times where the child was crying, saying, I don't want to go. I don't know this person. I've never seen them in my life. I never even seen them through FaceTime. And my coworker would say, we have to give them over. It's company policy that we can't bring a child back because the contract can be lost. I'm going to have to report you if you fight me on this. I was just given every excuse under the sun of don't listen to the child.
That's just, it's stunning, it's horrifying, and the government knows. But what's even more stunning is your email was from 2022. Deborah will probably recall the email we received. This is dated July 23 of 2021. This came from HHS headquarters. And because they were concerned about trafficking, which everybody says is not happening, right? They actually started a new email address called UC Migration at acfhhs.gov in 2021. They knew they had a trafficking problem. They knew. And so where are these children? Where are these children? You're being forced to reunify.
Right.
You're being forced to reunify. And who's being held accountable?
Yeah, Tara, I think the answer to that is absolutely no one is being held accountable, and that is the issue here. I have a letter from the federal field specialist at the site thanking me for my service there, for helping to implement training programs that supported making case managers aware of what trafficking signs look like. However, unfortunately, they did not do their due diligence. We know that.
Yep.
These are contracts that the taxpayer is paying billions of dollars for.
Yes.
And it is a dismal failure. You could go back to 2011 and you could see multiple household members connected to one sponsor, right? As seen in multiple requests to acquire children, as was the case in Bonita Springs with Antonio and his sister Rebecca. We knew about this. We're doing nothing about this. There's no accountability. And the program continues, and the Congress continues to approve the budget to continue to fund this year after year after year. There have been congressional inquiries that I know of in 2015, 16, 18, and today in 2023. So my question is, why?
I had a lot of kids who would tell me personally, the coyote or the person from the cartel would tell the kid, he told me, I'm going to be placed in a shelter where there's food and toys. The kids knew everything about the facilities before they would even arrive to them. So they knew how it all worked.
Yes.
So it's how in the hell do bad people know how the process is working in the United States? How do you know so much?
Right, because they run them through the system as, right, many times they are age redeterminations.
Yes.
We had adults, we had a 29-year-old female on our site pretending to be
a child.
And what did they do with her, Tara? They just allowed her to walk
Yeah.
off the site. So they provided us fake documentation. And what happened? What was the consequence? The consequence was she was allowed to walk free out of the door.
Yeah.
And that's not a one-off.
So we were secretly under the radar
Right.
getting training
Yes.
done, right?
Yes.
Right.
We partnered with our friends over at DHS, right? USCIS
Yes.
partners on the site, who we were told in the beginning, don't talk to them. They're
Right.
trying to get the kids deported. Just like you were told, don't talk to us.
Right.
We were told, don't talk to USCIS. They're trying to get the kids deported. And yet they were, you know, one of them was an asylum officer, the site lead. And they're telling us, oh, they're trying to get the kids deported. But then they were the ones who ultimately got us the OTIP training for Office of Trafficking in Persons. And we're slipping, you know, the training in to make sure that people knew. I mean, I had no idea when I deployed for the mission that kids were being trafficked through the site. And they never said kids were being trafficked through the site. We just saw it, plain as day. I'm like, hey, if you see anything regarding gangs.
Right.
And then the case manager came to you
Right.
and said, hey, I have this case about gangs. And you're like, hey, you have to go talk to Tara.
Right. Right. I connected you guys because
Right.
we
And
got-
what did we discover? We discovered that there are members of transnational criminal organizations like MS-13,
the
right?
Hollywood Elites.
Yes.
I will never forget that name.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the Hollywood clique of MS-13. Yeah, she was an MS-13 affiliated actor. And the coyote who brought the 22 children was a female smuggler, right? Also related to the gangs. Some of the kids were in the gangs.
Right.
And we said so many times, and it's unbelievable to have to say this, the day I get walked off this site is because we're standing against trafficking of these children. And I said, the day I get walked off this site, it's going to be because of trafficking. And that's exactly what happened.
And I remember that night because I came into the facility and I didn't see you. It was very somber to see you there
Yeah.
because we were working together as a team to help these kids. It wasn't the same, and then shortly after they closed it down. But not seeing you there was
Yeah.
it was a low blow.
Yeah. Well, and we had built trust relationships, right, with a
Exactly.
lot of people.
I think that the eye opener for a lot of the case managers to get that trust with you guys was when you came on the mic and, you know, it was like 500 of us, you know, maybe more, and it just went silent and you said,
Pull up this address.
pull up this address, and then all of a sudden you hear, you know, that's when we knew, okay, they are actually here to help. They're not here to deport like we were being told.
Right. Well,
They're
because tell
here
them
to
what
help.
we found, Myra.
You know,
What did we find?
It
When
was,
I told them
it was a gentleman's club, right?
yeah, where children were being sent, you know, and to trailers behind the club.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, they knew. They
Yeah.
know now. They knew then. And they're still not doing anything.
Right. We're here today. We know there's missing children. They're unaccounted for. And we're still asking the question 2 years later, where are the children and what have you done to locate them?
Yeah.
We don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah.
The answer that we've seen, at least, you know, on TV, is that our authority ends when we hand off the child in the transportation process.
Yeah. And I used to have hope that at least if we could compel HHS to turn over the names and the addresses of the sponsors, that we could find the children. But now I'm learning that they're turning the children over to not even the person who was supposed to be the sponsor,
Yeah. Right.
in baggage claim at an airport.
Right. And
Or
we have
an
had
empty
sponsors
pot
call
of-
back and say, you know, if we did get a hold of them during the 30-day calls, I don't have the kid anymore. I was just paid to pick him up from the airport.
Right.
I took him somewhere else.
Right.
And a lot of times the sponsors would back out last minute too. They would say, you keep the kid. And what would happen there was we would call it in and it would be don't bring the kid back. If you bring the kid back, you're going to be in trouble and you're going to get fired. They would say, give us 20 minutes, we'll call you back. And 20 minutes would turn into an hour or two, sometimes even longer than that. And then when we would finally get a call back, we would get an address to pretty much a homeless shelter, what it looked like. And it'd be like, the kid is approved to go there, go drop him off.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yes. And that happened to me a couple of times, where it's don't bring him back, don't do it, because you're gonna be let go. Because you already know that once we take the child out of their camp where they're at, their shelter, we're not supposed to bring him back.
So Carlos, it's really, astounding all that you've shared with all the different contractors and like MVM and the other NGOs. That's exactly what we found with Cherokee. And then, recently we find out that someone from within the U.S. government left the government, Andrew Lorenzen Strait, to get the Cherokee federal contract the Washington way.
Because I got this contract, well, in a very Washington way.
And as we can see, it's not going so well. So this is absolutely unacceptable. And for all of the billions of dollars the government spending, it's just horror after horror, and the children are gone.
I really just quite simply, Tara, since there was so much finger pointing between the government and the contractor saying, well, we're not getting the information we need from the government, so it's very hard for us to do our jobs on the Cherokee side. And then from the government side, they were like, Cherokee is failing all over the place. Literally, like those words, okay, like came from the federal field specialist.
Right.
Why would we pay a contractor if they're not fulfilling the requirements of the contract? Again, I never got access to the contract as many times as I'd asked for it. So what I can say is I know that there were sole source contracting efforts made to ensure that Cherokee Federal was the contractor of choice on the site. What I can say is that Southwest Keys and MVM, so Southwest Keys and MVM were also subcontractors and sole sourced. HHS has been sole sourcing this contract for this type of work, emergency intake shelters, for years and years.
Exactly.
And to date, they have not answered. The contractors have not answered. The government has not answered for why these sole source contracts are necessary. So again, there are companies out there that can do the same type of work, probably do it a lot better, yet the government continues to sole source these contracts to contractors that are failing at the site, and we've witnessed it. Southwest Keys was in the news because one of their employees sexually assaulted 3 children on an airplane. So I would define that as absolute failure.
And 85,000 children gone. That's failure.
And you would think, my email that I received from MBM was last year saying, hey, we messed up. We gave children to the wrong people, you would think they would have lost the contract. But here they are a year later, still moving kids. After I was done escorting the kids, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. My conscience can't take it. I got a call saying, hey, they're going to open up the very first hotel in New York City, and it's going to hold 5,000 people, and it's 28 floors up. So someone like me who got thrown into the fire now got handed a hotel with 5,000 migrants. And it's the Row NYC, a block away from Times Square. And so come to find out, when the people who were really in charge was a company named DocGo. New York City hired Health and Hospitals. Health and Hospital hired a company called Herc. A company called Herc hired a company called SLS Health. A company called SLS Health hired another company called Favored Healthcare Staffing. And Favored Healthcare Staffing is who was on my paycheck stubs. I'm sitting there with, this is what's going to happen, but I would have to make a phone call to other people above me who weren't even at the hotel. So say a husband just finished beating up his wife. I would have to call them and say, hey, what do you want to do? And they would call DocGo and say, hey, what do you want to do? And then they would get back to me and, hey, Carlos, I know this guy just finished beating his wife up, but you can't call NYPD. You have to handle it in-house because the guy was drunk. Just let him sober up. Let him make up with his wife. It's all going to be good. Don't call NYPD. So I would sit in meetings every day where it was me representing the people who employed me, and it was always, take them to DocGo. DocGo will handle it. Don't call NYPD. And the worst part about this hotel was there was rapes that happened, and the only solution was send them to DocGo, and it ends there.
Wow.
Don't call NYPD. Don't call NYPD.
So hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts
Just in one hotel.
in one location,
Yeah.
and no one is involving law enforcement
No
because you're
one.
not allowed.
I was there for months. I never called ICE. I never called NYPD. I never called no one, no agency, no one.
So you're saying protocol was to allow violence and rape?
Yeah, handle it in-house.
Yep.
Handle it in-house, because if we start telling other agencies what's going on, the contract's going to be lost.
It's all
So protect
about the
the- protect-
money.
Protect the contract.
Protect the contract at all costs.
Yeah.
Well, as we work together, to continue to speak out and save the kids, I really hope that others are going to join us in this fight, because all these children are here and we do not know where they are.
We cannot continue to fund a program that has failed over and over again, year after year. How many times does this have to go before Congress? How many times does the Inspector General have to do a report before something is done? So this is really, for me, the call to action here is to the Congress. You hold the purse strings. Hold them back if a program is failing. Do not continue to use my taxpayer dollars and everyone else's taxpayer dollars to fund a failed program.
And the more I think about it is, you've had Mayorkas, you had the ORR director, you've had all these people who had to testify in DC. And a lot of the times when they get asked questions, they say, I don't know, I don't have that number. But I honestly believe part of the reason why they say they don't know is because they really don't know. Because the people in charge are the NGOs, pretty much. It's time that NGOs are held accountable. I would like to see the CEO of Southwest Keys, Deployed Resources, Endeavors, Cherokee. There's a lot of these companies out there who are accepting contracts worth millions
Right.
And I think it's time.
You know, Carlos, that is a great suggestion. There's nothing better than transparency and accountability. And you're right, there is no accountability. And I think that's what we all want to see. Transparency and accountability for the children and for the hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that are funding child trafficking.
Yeah. And it's not acceptable that our government can say, I don't know, and not have to answer the question. That's not acceptable.
No, exactly.
If we're the ones that are signing the contracts and authorizing billions of dollars to be released for a service on a program, then those services better be rendered in accordance with the contract before we pay that bill.
Yes.
And if they don't know how to answer that question, then they don't deserve the position that they're in.
Agreed. So this has been a really tough thing to talk about, but I thank you all for stepping forward to speak the truth, stepping out of the shadows. Mayra Moreno, Deborah White, Carlos Oriano, you all are heroes. And I thank you for standing up, and America's Future thanks you for standing up for the children, for shining a light into this darkness. And with your help, I believe we're going to be able to give hope. We are going to create hope and be that voice for the children that they need. So I thank you. You've come thousands of miles to be here, to join me in the great state of Virginia, in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. You are making a difference. So I thank you so much for your time.